And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, I have Jason Miller, the director of Ghosts of the Void on. Jason, thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, to start off with, I just wanted to know what got you into filmmaking.
Oh, I don't, I wouldn't even know. It goes so far back. Like the first movie I ever saw, I think I wanted to do this. So,
Okay, great. So, what made you want to tell this story?
yeah, well, first of all, I think this story started as, um, honestly, it was kind of a practical thing. It was just like, I want to make a movie that I can make, you know. Been trying to get projects off the ground that were a little bit above what a first time director is usually given. And so finally, I kind of took a step back and said, okay, what's the simplest story I could tell? I was sitting in my car after work and said, well, let's tell a story that takes place in a car. Why would people be stuck in a car that's not moving? And eventually started coming up with the idea that two people being evicted and kind of having to sleep in their car and what could happen to them under those conditions.
Mm,
Once I had that element of it, it became very personal for me. And I knew that that was the story I had to tell, was this story of two people kind of struggling to get on their feet and get out of debt and get into the situation. Um, so yeah, I knew I wanted to be horror because I love horror. I love how horror you can use that medium of horror to sort of tap into anxieties and fears that are real. And that was a real anxiety and fear that I've been familiar with, is that those sleepless nights of what am I going to do? How am I going to get, how am I going to pay rent? It's due tomorrow. What am I going to do? So like translating that into a horror story became the main objective for me.
yeah, because I was noticing a lot of this movie, it takes place just in one location, which is the car. How did you go about figuring just to have it in that one place?
Uh, that was a lot of work. That was tricky. Made a lot of revisions to the script, just trying to find how do you keep this story going? How do you keep it? I you realize very quickly it's like, okay, if I ramp up the tension too much too fast, they're just going to leave.
Yeah.
If I ramp it up in such a way that the audience is aware something might be going on, but they're not, get a little bit of time, but not a lot. Um, and so eventually it's like, well, how do I keep them in the lot once they know that something's wrong? What's going to keep them from leaving? So you're just building it up step by step, one scene at a time. You're just trying to create reasons why they have to be here and they can't leave. They want to stay. Um, and so, yeah, it was just a lot of just going back and forth in the script, trying to find that balance and find that line.
Right. Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, because I did like how there was like a tonal balance in it between horror and then between drama. How did you
Mhm.
find the right sort of balance between those sort of categories?
Yeah. Um, well, I again, like I knew the theme had to play a big part of it. Once I had this idea of these characters being evicted, that was the story that I had to tell. Um, so there was, there was a lot in the script of just trying to motivate a lot of the horror that they're experiencing with something that is they're experiencing, they have experienced it in their life previously. Um, and so I tried to kind of find that these ways where something might happen that creeps them out and kind of starts getting weirder and weirder. That's then referencing back to one of the flashbacks that's kind of indicating what this kind of fear might symbolize for them at this moment. But I think I really started finding that with the actors, because
Hmm.
they brought so much to it. Michael and Tedra, they brought so much to it that I knew that I had some good stuff with them. And so just you start leaning into that. Um, when you're shooting a film at this budget level and there's a lot of restrictions, you don't always get exactly what you want from, in terms of production value, in terms of like all the shots I want and all the different elements I want. So, I'm looking at it thinking like, okay, I've had to cut my shot list in half. I'm not going to get to do this really creepy liminal thing I wanted to do over here, but Tedra and Michael are killing it. So I'm going to work with that. I'm going to lean into that. And so, yeah, the drama became a bigger element in many ways because of that, because of the restrictions and because of their performances.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you go about finding them? Because they were great in the movie.
Yeah, we just did a casting process. The casting company in Chicago. They came from, I think Tedros came from New York. Michael is based in Atlanta, I believe. I think he still is. So yeah, they auditioned, and we had a lot of auditions for it, and they were all really good. We got a lot of really good stuff. It was a tough choice, but I think I made the right ones.
Yeah, yeah, no, you did. They were great in it, and I noticed the movie is methodically paced. How did you come up with the structure of the film?
Yeah, well, again, it's kind of back to like just trying to make sure each scene is adding to the dilemma, but not so much so that I escalate it to a point that I can't control it anymore. Because yeah, like once things get too crazy, there's only so much you can do before you either kill them off or let them run away. So it's always like, yeah, just trying to find like ways that they don't want to leave, but then also trying to find that where each thing that happens to them is a little bit more tense than the last, and is adding to their drama and their divide that they're having between them. So yeah, you just each scene, just you have to add another element, even if it's very subtle and nuanced.
Yeah. What made you to hook the audience? What made you decide to hook the audience on Tyler and Jen's relationship more than the horror element of the masked strangers of the film, or at least that be the case in the beginning?
Yeah, I think I think if you're going to put two people in a car for the movie, that really has to be the driving thing, is what how they're relating to each other. It's there's just, you're very limited in where you can take things. So leaning into character, it becomes essential for that.
Yeah. How do you think artists like Tyler and Jen survive on their own? Do artists really get properly compensated enough? Because that seemed to be what their issue was, is that they, were artists, but they couldn't survive, and now this is why they're living in this
Yeah.
truck.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just difficult to get ahead in any arts, anything that filmmaking obviously is my personal one. It takes a long time to get to the point where you can do it for a living, and you have there's a certain amount of privilege that you have to kind of come with in order to even pursue a career in filmmaking or in writing or in any of those things. That there's a certain privilege to having the time and the headspace to even take that on. It can be very hard, and it can be very stressful, and and it's, as far as like artists getting compensated, that's a tough thing, I think, in anything, filmmaking especially. It's really hard because no one's going to give you a lot of money to go make your first movie. No one's going to pay you that much to just do it for the first time. And nor should they, because I don't think that would be a very financially wise thing. And nobody would get to make movies if they did that, because the stakes would be so high. So yeah, you have to kind of be willing to make those sacrifices.
Yeah. And where did the idea of the masked strangers come from?
Yeah, I went through so many different ideas for what might happen to them. And I wrote, there was, the first draft of the script was completely different. And the producers of the movie didn't read this first draft. That was just a complete bonkers, like nightmare scenario where everything is kind of a hallucination from within the car. I eventually kind of came to the idea that, well, I wrote that script, and then sometime later, I wrote it just to have something in my back pocket for like a really low budget feature. And then some time later, I decided to pull it back up. And this time I was just in a different mood, I guess, and said, let me just do something straightforward. Let me do like The Strangers in a Parking Lot. It's just a straight thriller. And I wrote that. But I found that I wasn't really satisfied with that. And so I started kind of finding that middle ground. So The Masked Strangers went from being just kind of, your kind of typical thriller threat to sort of a vague kind of concept, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. What do you think, without giving much away, what do you think the Masked Strangers wanted, and why did they want it?
I don't know how to give things away. Now I think that they ultimately kind of represent Jen's realization of the sacrifices that she's going to have to make in order to move on with her life. And well, I'm not going to say that because that would be too much spoiler, but I think that's pretty much it. It's a matter of, what they want is to make her face the reality of her situation. So, yeah.
Do you relate more to Tyler or Jen, or do you kind of relate to them both?
I think in different ways I relate to them both. Tyler's very problematic, so I don't want to go too far in saying that I relate to him. But I definitely relate to Tyler's, frustration with the creative process and feeling like he wants to give up. The way that sort of manifests in him becomes, a very troubling thing. But in terms of like just the worry and fear, I think I relate a little bit to Jen. I think you can almost kind of see them both as two sides of the same personality. And the ending then becomes I guess you could say like a representation of what we give up for.
Because I'm sorry.
No, just what we give up for, a life in this society.
Because it seemed like their relationship was kind of toxic, and they kind of had to leave each other at a certain point. But you could see why they were so close to one another at the same time. They're both artists who want to do something. And of course, Michael's character was particularly hurt when Tyler basically was told by his girlfriend, or she wasn't trying to tell him, but his book wasn't so good. And he basically had a full-on breakdown over that. I don't know. Do you think if they left each other earlier, things would have been better for the two of them?
Maybe. For me, I kind of one aspect of it I was really interested in was this idea of mental health, and kind of exploring, I think, what I believe to be the fact that mental health is not taken seriously enough in this country. It's still kind of a luxury. It's still something that you can seek out when you have the means and the time and the wherewithal to do that. When you're in situations like what Jen and Tyler are, you often don't have those resources. And so, what I was kind of getting to with these characters were, these are two people that are just one step away from figuring their life out. They're one right medication prescription, one right therapy session away from having that outlet, but they don't have that, and so they try to give it to each other. They try to be each other's source, but it doesn't work. And Tyler ends up kind of going into alcohol. Jen just kind of ends up spiraling into what she spirals into. So yeah, I think that was more than anything, more than the saying that they would be better off if they just kind of left each other early on. I think they would both be better off if they would have taken some time for themselves to work on themselves.
Yeah.
Despite their problems, despite their financial situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point, because mental health really, it's still kind of like it's something that you have to be able to afford a lot of
Right.
times these days. Or, if you're on the right healthcare plan, you can get it. But yeah, for them, it's like, how are they going to even be able to find a doctor when they can't afford the bills?
Right.
It just becomes increasingly difficult for them. Um, what do you think the title of the movie, Ghosts of the Void, mean? Is it the guilt that we carry with the relationship and the baggage that comes back to haunt us?
Yeah, it could be that. It could be a couple of things. It's interesting because that wasn't the original title of the movie. The original title was The Lot, and so very simple. But the producers were like, we want to consider changing this title. And I will admit, I was kind of reluctant at first. It's fine. We don't need to do that. But I started thinking about it, and the thing that really kind of hit me. Well, first of all, I'll say this: the title that we ended up going with, I think, came from the guy who designed our poster. Who, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, because producers were kind of interacting with him, kind of middleman style. So I never actually spoke to him, but he, I think, was the one that came up with, hey, call it Ghost of the Void. And my first thought was, well, that's a weird title. And then my second thought was like, that's a weird title. Kind of works. And it was interesting too, because it actually, it reminded me of a line that I had put in the pitch deck when I was shopping this thing around. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but it said something to the effect of, the lot is that place you find yourself when you've hit rock bottom, when you've lost everything, when you don't have any hope left. And the masked strangers are, the demons that wait for you there, or something to that effect. I remember that line. It's like, well, this title actually kind of, works with that original pitch that I made. So yeah, let's go with it. So yeah, I would say like that's ultimately, this is, the void is that hopelessness that people so often find themselves in, and the ghosts are the things that keep coming for you, even though you think you have nothing left to give.
Yeah. So I know you talked a little bit about this before, but I just want to circle back to it. It seems like you went through a lot of drafts in the script in the writing process, from what you told me. How many did you go through, and what was that like, and how much of it was improvised or used in the film?
Oh, man, I don't keep track of drafts. I have no idea how people even. I don't know how people could write like 3 drafts.
Yeah.
Like here's the first draft, here's the second draft, here's a polish. It's like, it's more like, here's a draft. Hold on, let me go back. Here's another draft.
Yeah.
Hold on, I changed the scene. Can you read it again? It's like, it's the whole thing. But yeah, it's we cut a lot from the script because of limitations of the shoot. We ended up having things happen. It's a low budget film, and indie filmmakers, you gotta kind of hustle and figure out things on the fly, which I think is true for any film, but it's especially true on indie film. And we had stuff come up. We lost a location at one point, had like to regroup. This is like right at the end of the shoot. We were shooting the flashback scenes, actually, and we lost the original location for the flashback scenes. And we had 2 days left of shooting, and we just lost one of them. And we didn't have a location. So producers are scrambling to find something. They did, and they came through, found that location. But now I'm faced with the dilemma of, I've got 2 days worth of scenes that I now have to shoot in 1 day. something's got to go. And so I actually sat down with the actors and talked to them about like, what do we need to shoot most in order to tell these character stories? And we kind of worked it out together. Just looking at it and looking at it from a character standpoint of what matters most here. So yeah, we lost a lot there, which, you know, once we get the final cut of the movie, I'm looking at it going like, well, we didn't need any more of those flashbacks. So I think we're probably good there. Although I would say that I think, well, no, we got what we needed, and I'm proud of the movie that came out of it. You know, it's well, what was your original question? You're talking about like how much of the scenes end up the movie and that kind of thing. How much was improv? There was not a lot of, just a ton of improv, but there was some. And I like to encourage that with the actors, to just bring their own kind of moments to the scenes. Actually, now that you mention it, there was one scene that was entirely improvised, and it was the scene that you mentioned earlier where they're talking about the book. I had written something for that, but I got in the moment and I just told Michael and Tedros, like, let's just throw this out and here's the main points that we need to kind of touch upon, and let's just roll with it and see what comes out of it. And I love, that's one of my favorite scenes, I think, because of that, because of just this interaction that they have that just feels so real, and, you know, kind of petty on Michael's part, and, you know, frustrated on Tedros. There was just so much kind of genuine stuff happening there.
Yeah. What do you want the audience to think about when the film wraps up? As it doesn't wrap on a usual easy horror film note where it's like, okay, this one died, this one survived, that's it. Hey, let's go home. That was a fun movie.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it is a bit of, you know, it's a well, again, we're in spoiler territory just to say it's a downer to figure out, you know, what happens,
right,
one way or another. But, you know, I was saying this to this guy before, that, you know, for me, again, going back to horror as a genre, sort of being an outlet, being something that, you know, allows us to sort of face our anxieties and face our fears from the safety of a theater seat, and just be able to, you know, say, there's something, I think, therapeutic, I think, especially for horror fans, that even if the film is, you know, kind of, you know, dark and shows kind of the worst outcome of a situation, it's not necessarily that that's the message, right? If there is a message, and I don't really like messages, I just kind of like feelings. I just want to make you feel something about this thing. But if there was a message, I would hope that most people kind of have some sense of hopefulness from it. At least horror fans, at least people who do find therapy through this genre, to be able to look at this and say, and, you know, people who've been in this situation, who are struggling to get by, who do experience that anxiety, to sit back and watch this movie portray it in this sort of symbolic way, and walk away from it going, well, I can do better than that. You know, I can take care of myself better than those two have.
right.
You know, so yeah, that's kind of my view of it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's interesting view to have indeed. If Tyler and Jen, this is an easy one. Do you think if they just stayed at a motel, the whole situation could have been avoided?
Yeah, maybe. Probably so. I mean, you know, it would be interesting to sort of think on that as as like a thought experiment of how, because there's two things happening in this movie. There's the harassment that they're experiencing, and then there's their own drama that's sort of unraveling, and one is kind of influencing the other. But yeah, that's a good point. Like, if they just had each other, it didn't have the extra added stress of that night, where would they have ended up?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe a more I'm sure the drama was bubbling up, and it would eventually, because that, that resentment and tension was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
But it might have come out in maybe a more healthy way if they had a neutral place to kind of hash it out.
Right. Right. Yeah. Instead of somewhere like right out in the middle of the open where they're unsafe. Where
Yeah.
where did the idea of just having it take place in the parking lot come from?
Yeah. Again, that goes back to just, low budget movie rules,
Yeah.
looking at it and saying like, well, I need to keep it as simple and, as I can. Now, my mistake there, my mistake was the idea of making a film on a low budget and keeping it in one location is simplicity. I made mine the middle of the night in a dark parking lot. So I kind of like shot myself in the foot in that regard, because it was huge. It was like a whole undertaking every night, just trying to shoot in this pitch black parking lot that we had to build the lighting setup for every night from the ground up. It was pretty crazy, but theoretically the idea was try to make a movie that's simple in one place. And I wrote the script also very I kept the script as basic as I could in terms of the location, because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You never know once you start doing location scouts, and I didn't want too much of the story to rely on a whole bunch of elements that we had to seek out and find. So it was just a parking lot and woods, and I figured whatever else we found would be bonus. And so I was very happy when we found a parking lot that had playground on it, because that was added a nice liminal quality to the location, I felt like.
Yeah.
But even like, I did write in the script that there would be this chain link fence dividing these woods from a country club. And then that becomes a whole thing, that finding a country club with a tree line and a chain link fence was a huge hassle. We found one in all of Chicago that kind of worked for that. So yeah, that's the thing about locations, man. It's like you get too specific, then
Yeah.
you're gonna you got to be flexible.
Yeah. So what was the most or actually I should say you mentioned you filmed in Chicago. What made you decide to stick with that for the movie?
Well, it came. Well, it's from a Chicago production company. Seth is the producer. He's a good friend of mine. We go back a long ways. And so, he kind of came to me. We had just finished his first feature, Echo Boomers, and he came to me and said, "Hey, man, I had helped him write that script, and I was kind of a co-producer ish on it." But he came to me after that was wrapped up and was like, "Hey, you've got something that you want to do, just say the word and I will pull it together." And I kind of came around and said, like, now that you mention it, I do have this script. I'm trying, I was kind of at one point wanting to maybe do it myself. And I live in Arkansas right now. So, that was kind of, I thought if nothing else, like, I'm going to shoot it here in my hometown and, just figure it out. But as Seth's offering, let me just see what he can pull together. So he starts pulling together the money, he starts pulling together all the people. And, because of that, it was a given that it would be shot in Chicago. But it was great because Chicago has such great film people, and we had such a great crew. People that just really stepped up and gave it their all. So I'm glad we shot here for sure.
Yeah. So what would you say was the most rewarding part of the production?
I would say working with Michael and Tedra more than anything. and working with Nathan too, my DP. But yeah, working with Michael and Tedra was the part that I felt best about. When when everything was falling apart, I knew that they were delivering something that worked. So that was always the most confident thing of the whole shoot for sure.
Yeah. And I know you touched on it before. You said it was kind of difficult filming in the middle of the parking lot in the middle of the night. What was that the most difficult aspect of the production, or what was the most difficult aspect?
Um, I think it was. I think it's kind of everything together, really. Um, it's very cold. We were shooting in November. It was freezing. As I said, that parking lot did not have a street light. There was no natural light at all. And so, every night the crew would get there, the G&E team would just start building up, this whole, our phony street light and our moonlight and everything. And they're doing that in pitch black because that parking lot was actually at a school. It was at a church, but it was a church / school. But so it had kids there until 6 o'clock before we could even get on the premises, because we could not be on the premises when the kids were there. So there was no option for us to even start shooting when there was light outside for them to work by. So that we get there pitch black, and they're walking around with their flashlights on their little stands and just getting it done. But again, in the cold mud, just it was pretty rough.
Wow. Yeah. And thank God you had the cast that you did, because they did a great job. And now we have AI replacing actors, stand-ins, and de-aging them. How much do you think we should rely on that technology, or should we even rely on it instead of? Could it ever replace an actor? Is what I'm asking.
I don't think it will anytime soon. That's for sure. Here's my thing with AI. I think by the time AI advances to a point where it can tell a story and create a performance that is intuitive enough and insightful enough to be, to really trigger that algorithm that runs our brains. By the time that happens, I think we're probably screwed as a species anyway. Would the computers know us well enough to create that? I think the arts will be kind of the least of our worries. But no, I don't see that happening soon. I do think that from a writing standpoint, at least, and from any standpoint, really, it's not. I think what all the unions are concerned with now it's not so much what AI can do, it's what the studio thinks AI can do, and how they might leverage those misconceptions to underpay people. So yeah, that's the big thing, right now. But they're doubling down on it. If you read all the news, they're all about no, we're hiring people to figure this out for us. And it's yeah, I don't think you're there yet, and you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not gonna at least keep your actors and writers around.
Yeah.
Until you figure that stuff out.
Yeah, I don't think a computer could ever replicate what a human could feel, but
sure.
We never know. Maybe it could one day, because they say that in all the movies. Like, a computer can't feel. Like, you take Steven Spielberg's AI, that was designed to love, and look what happened there. But that's one of my favorite movies. But no,
me too. Very underrated.
Oh, really? Yeah, I loved it. I did a whole episode on it and how it's overlooked. And I think now, as years have gone by, people have gone back and looked at it and been like, actually, that was a pretty decent movie.
Because, I think it was ahead of its time, but I have seen people coming back around to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when I saw that movie in the theater as a kid, and I went to the bathroom, and in the bathroom there was these two guys. They were like, That was so stupid. He was praying to a statue for like 2,000 years. What was the point of that? I'm like, you guys didn't get the movie at all.
Right.
Like, I was crying after that movie, and people were like making fun of it. I'm like, that
Yeah.
sucks. But yeah, before we go, I just have some fun questions, some fun rapid question fires to shoot off, and then
Sure.
yeah, that's it. So, what was your favorite horror film growing up?
Well, I didn't really watch horror growing up because I wasn't allowed to.
Oh,
I loved horror as an idea, and the best I could do was like Goosebumps books and stuff like that for the longest time. Now I was allowed to watch Jaws, and Jaws, was one of my favorite movies and still is, and is an all-time great film. As a kid, I didn't think of it as a horror film, but I guess technically it is. So that one would probably be.
yeah.
But once I got older and really was, could do what I want, I started seeking out all the horror films that I ever wanted to see, and I couldn't say which one was my favorite.
Yeah, there's a
No.
lot to choose from. Jaws is kind of
Yeah.
like that's more of like a thriller than a horror. I
Yeah.
always thought, but it
Yeah.
is a horror element, especially the beginning plays like a horror film where the girl's swimming out on her own and then she gets eaten. So, I think actually there was on Channel Bravo, they had like a list of like 100 horror films and they rated Jaws as number one. I'm like, that's an odd
Hmm.
choice. Like you would think it would
Yeah.
be The Exorcist or something like that.
Right.
Right. So, what's your favorite guilty pleasure film?
I don't know. Maybe like the Friday the 13th franchise
Right.
as a
Yeah.
whole,
Yeah.
something like that.
For me, it was the
Um,
Halloween franchise. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my favorite 80s horror franchise is A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I don't so
Yeah.
much consider that a guilty pleasure because I think well, at least the first one is legit good. It's a great film. So I don't, Friday the 13th, I consider more guilty pleasure because, it's a little bit more schlocky and a little bit more of that kind of thing. But, it's fun.
Yeah. And what's the worst film you've ever seen?
Oh, gosh. Um, hmm.
Yeah. That's always a tough one. Like, I had to think for a while, like, mine had to be Freddy Got Fingered. But
Yeah, I never
yeah.
saw that one. I mean, I think about a lot of like just like the super, bottom of the barrel kind of, um, low budget films with that you can tell somebody just really just shot it on a camcorder and threw some really bad CG effects on it and are marketing, with like really good cover art to try
Right.
to sell this thing. I couldn't say, I don't want to necessarily like call anybody's film out necessarily
Right. Right.
for
That's a
that.
nice thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever fallen asleep during a movie? Like
No,
at
I
the
don't think
theater?
so.
Okay.
No, I'm a very picky sleeper, so I've
Ah,
never had that.
yeah.
I don't sleep on planes. I can't sleep in a car. I can't.
Oh,
I got to
wow.
sleep in my own bed. That's
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I kind of used to have that. I'll fall asleep in a car and a plane, but yeah, like when it comes to beds, it's like unless it's my bed, I'm just like, "Argh," and I can't fall asleep. Uh, what's a movie you like to watch when you're feeling down?
Hmm. I'm feeling down. No. Um, yeah, if we're talking horror, again, something like A Nightmare on Elm Street, where I can just shut off and just enjoy, the familiarity of it.
Hmm.
Um, but something like Jaws, something like Jurassic Park, those childhood favorites that just are just good and straightforward, and I can just, like I
Yeah.
said, just shut down and just enjoy the nostalgia of it.
Right. And what's your favorite film watching when you're feeling up?
Hmm. Maybe same answer. I don't know. Uh,
That's
it's all
okay.
the same for me. It's up down. It's if I'm happy, I want to watch something I really love, and if I'm unhappy, I want to watch something that I really love. So
Right. Right.
um,
Have you seen Barbie or Oppenheimer yet?
Not yet. No.
Yeah, yeah, they're both great. It's funny.
Yeah.
People are always
I
like,
hear.
which one should I see? And I'm like, well, it depends what you want. But usually, I mean, Barbie's the easier one to digest for
Yeah.
sure.
I'm
Uh,
hoping I might the next few weeks are so busy for me, and I'm really hoping that Oppenheimer gets a second release in a few months so that I
mm,
have the chance to get out to the IMAX and watch it properly.
yeah, because there's not very. They had a 70 millimeter projection where I was at, which I was surprised they did that at because they had the edit the AMC in the
Mm,
River East in Chicago, and I didn't even know they had a film projector there. And I could
nice.
tell it was film because, like, in the beginning, it just flashed with the little numbers, and I'm like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
I'm like, they actually pulled that off. I mean, it looked amazing, but yeah. And then, oh, what do you think is better, film or digital?
Well, I've never worked with film. I'm a newbie to the medium, so I was taught up on digital. I will say though that in recent years, I've started to really notice the beauty of film, and I'm kind of starting to understand why so many filmmakers are kind of you know um, all about it. Um, at the same time, though, Roger Deakins uses digital now, and he's fine with it, and I mean he's terrific. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
so many different advantages to both mediums. Film
Mm-hmm.
has such that you know beautiful depth to it, um, but at the same time, digital is more versatile, and you can do more with it. I think about a movie like The Revenant and
Mm,
the things they were able to, the imagery they were able to create in that film was just incredible. So
yeah,
I,
and that was
I think
natural
the
lighting
digital
with digital.
nature is what allowed them to be in those elements under those conditions and get that imagery. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Where can we find Ghosts of the Void?
um, as a to watch it, you mean like as a
Yeah.
well, um, we're still kind of working out our distribution thing. So I don't know exactly when that's going to come out, but we are talking about it. I don't know what I'm allowed to say yet about that. But as far as the immediate future, we are officially premiering it Monday at the Gene Siskel Theater in Chicago. And then after that, it's going to play at various festivals. There's one coming up in New York. But I think for people nationwide, the most immediate opportunity to see it will be, I think, starting August 16th. It's going to play in the virtual program of Popcorn Frights. Um,
Oh,
so that's very exciting. That's a great festival. They've been awesome. Um, so yeah, that one, the exciting thing about that one is it's virtual. So you can pay your $10 and watch it, at any point during those few days that it's up. Um, but if you're in Chicago, come out on Monday and see it in person and it's on a big screen. So
and this on the at the Gene Siskel Film Center?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Part of
Excellent.
the Midwest Film Fest.
Yes, that's what I figured it was. I think I remember reading about that. So thank you, Jason, for coming
Yeah,
on. Jason Miller, director of Ghosts of the Void. Uh, so, guys, when it's distributed and really out there, we'll let you know. Please, I'll be sure to keep track of it. And otherwise, thank you for coming on and talking about your film.
yeah. Thank you.
All right. With that, everyone, if you liked what you heard today or were watching, check out You'll Probably Agree. That is YPA Reviews, and the YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. You can check out all my work at ypareviews.com. All right. See you, folks.